How the 1980s changed the United States forever. Imagine waking up in an America where computers were still a rarity, telephones were connected by cords to the wall, and the internet simply didn't exist. It was a very different country from the one we know today. Now imagine witnessing, in just 10 years, a transformation so profound that it would reshape the economy, technology, culture, and the daily lives of millions of people. The 1980s were not just another decade in American history. They were the years when America took its first steps into the modern world. And many of the changes that began during that time continue to shape our lives today. When we think about the 1980s, the first images that come to mind are neon lights, unforgettable music, blockbuster movies, and bold fashion. But that's only part of the story. Behind the nostalgia was a nation undergoing dramatic economic, technological, political, and social change. Changes that would redefine not only the United States but much of the world. So how did a single decade transform a nation forever? When the decade began in 1980, the United States was facing a period of uncertainty. Inflation was high. Interest rates had reached historic levels. Unemployment was affecting millions of American families. At the same time, the Cold War kept the world divided between two superpowers, creating the constant fear of a nuclear conflict. Few could have imagined that the next 10 years would become one of the most transformative periods in American history. Over the course of the decade, the economy would recover. New technologies would enter American homes. American culture would spread across the globe. And an entirely new way of life would begin to emerge. A new economy. Much of that transformation began with sweeping economic changes. The government introduced policies aimed at reducing taxes, encouraging investment, and limiting government involvement in the economy. Businesses expanded rapidly. New office buildings rose across major cities. The stock market experienced significant growth. Consumer spending returned as a symbol of success. Credit cards became part of everyday life for millions of Americans. Shopping malls expanded quickly and became much more than places to shop. They became social centers where families spent weekends together, teenagers gathered with friends, and people watched movies, ate at food courts, and discovered the latest fashion trends. For many Americans, it felt as though prosperity had finally returned. But not everyone shared in that success. While some accumulated wealth, many industrial communities saw factories close and jobs disappear. Economic inequality began to grow, creating divisions that would continue for decades. The technology revolution. While the economy was changing, another revolution was quietly taking place. At the beginning of the 1980s, very few households owned a personal computer. They were expensive, limited, and mostly used by businesses or universities. That soon began to change. Personal computers became smaller, more affordable, and easier to use. Schools introduced computer education. Offices gradually replaced typewriters with computers. Businesses discovered entirely new ways to organize information and improve productivity. For the first time, millions of people began to imagine a future where technology would become part of everyday life. Few realized that these early machines were laying the foundation for the internet, smartphones, and the digital world we live in today. American pop culture takes over the world. If there was one area where the 1980s truly stood out, it was popular culture. Television had never been more influential. Music videos transformed the music industry. An artist's image became just as important as the music itself. Hollywood entered one of its most successful eras. Adventure films, science fiction, action movies, and comedies dominated theaters around the world. Fashion also changed dramatically. Leather jackets, athletic sneakers, shoulder pads, big hairstyles, bright neon colors. Everything reflected a decade that genuinely believed the future had arrived. For the first time, American culture became a daily part of life for millions of people around the globe. The fear never disappeared. Yet while television celebrated prosperity and entertainment, another feeling remained. Fear. Throughout the decade, the rivalry between the United States and the Soviet Union kept the world on edge. The possibility of a nuclear war felt frighteningly real. At the same time, a new epidemic was emerging. AIDS brought fear, uncertainty, and enormous challenges for public health. In many major cities, rising drug use and violent crime became growing concerns. Behind the bright lights and optimism of the 1980s was a much more complicated reality. Everyday life. Even so, for millions of Americans, the 1980s remain unforgettable. It was the decade of arcades, video rental stores, cassette tapes, massive stereo systems, and the first generation of home video game consoles. Children played outside until sunset. Teenagers spent hours wandering through shopping malls. Families gathered around the television every evening. Life moved at a completely different pace. There were no smartphones, no social media, no endless stream of notifications. People connected face to face. The end of the decade. As the 1980s came to a close, one event changed the course of history. In November 1989, the Berlin Wall began to fall. The images spread around the world. For millions of people, it symbolized the weakening of the Cold War and the beginning of a new era. At the same time, the United States ended the decade as the world's leading economic, military, technological, and cultural power. America's global influence had never been greater. Reflection. The 1980s left behind far more than unforgettable music, classic movies, and iconic fashion. It was the decade that accelerated technological innovation, reshaped the economy, changed the way people consumed goods and entertainment, and transformed everyday life for millions. Much of the modern world began taking shape during those remarkable years. Many of the technologies, companies, and lifestyles we now take for granted were born during the 1980s. Looking back at the 1980s reminds us that some decades do more than record history. They change its direction. Between prosperity and hardship, innovation and uncertainty, hope and fear, the United States experienced a transformation that reshaped both the nation and the world. More than 40 years later, we are still living with the legacy of the changes that began during that extraordinary decade. The 1980s may have ended in 1989, but their influence has never truly disappeared.